say they're still waiting for some countries to send background checks on passengers who were on a missing Malaysia Airlines jetliner. It comes as they intensify inquiries into a suspected deliberate diversion of the plane, which disappeared more than a week ago with 239 passengers on board, 6 of whom were Australians. Police are also investigating passengers, airport ground staff and the 2 pilots. But Peter Chong, a friend of the captain, says he doesn't believe the pilot was involved in the plane's disappearance.
Because I know him as a person that cares for people and who's responsible in his job. And if anything were to happen to the plane, he would make sure that everyone else, crew and passengers, their welfare is taken care of before he even thinks about himself.
Meanwhile, Malaysia has appealed for international help in the search for the plane across 2 corridors stretching from the shores of the Caspian Sea to the far south of the Indian Ocean. Australia's Defence Minister David Johnston says Australia is prepared to put more resources into the search for the missing jetliner. Australia has sent 2 Orion aircraft to search for the plane. Senator Johnston says Australia will do whatever it can to help, but needs as much from Malaysia as possible.
I know the Prime Minister would want to do that, and I think that's very clear. Malaysia's a good friend of Australia, and we would want to assist them in whatever way we conceivably could.
SO is checking.
Okay, now let's go back to the maps. I'm afraid my maps aren't really fancy, but using them, I did post a movie on Friday night called Hijacked Malaysian Boeing 777. Engine satellite telemetry, search the Andaman Islands. Based on the theory that if the aircraft was flying at 350 miles per hour, which gives an 8-hour flight to Peking, which is what the flight was advertised as being, and if the aircraft indeed flew for 5 hours, or actually the original figure was 4 hours after it diverted from its last known position, and if it crossed the Malaysian Peninsula, and if it disappeared heading west in the direction of India, and if it was down at wavetop height, then you get 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and 4 hours, or if the aircraft disappeared on a heading of northwest instead of west, you'd get 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, with an hour to practice touch and goes before actually settling down. I have no idea why the news is now saying that the aircraft which transmitted engine data saying that it flew for 5 hours could perhaps have flown as long as 7 hours. Well, 7 hours from the point of departure would be 8 hours from takeoff, which was the original distance of the flight to Peking. Now, this is the boundary of an 8-hour flight at 350 miles per hour at 35,000 feet, where the air is less dense and there's a lot less oxygen, so you burn a lot less fuel. Again, that's your 8-hour flight at 350 miles per hour with Beijing there. Now, admittedly, aircraft carry fuel in reserve, right? So you'd expect another 2 hours perhaps worth of fuel, which takes us out to there, or into Pakistan. Okay, so point of diversion, extreme limit of the range, assuming that the aircraft has gone back up to cruising height, and used absolutely all of its fuel reserves. Yeah, it could have got to Pakistan, you know, Rawalpindi, Peshawar, Wah, Faisalabad, Lahore, Sukkur, Kaipur, past Hyderabad, past Karachi. So I have no idea why various news media outlets are suggesting that the aircraft has taken off on either a northwest corridor or a southwest corridor, and a southwest corridor pretty much leads nowhere. But instead of saying, oh, the aircraft could have got as far as Pakistan, they're claiming that it could have got as far as Kazakhstan, which is on the northeast coast of the Caspian Sea. Now, the only way that it could have got that far would be if it landed somewhere in this territory to refuel, because Kazakhstan on the northeast corner of the Caspian Sea is precisely twice the full tank fuel range with a 2-hour reserve for a Boeing 777. Okay, so unless they reckon that it landed somewhere in central India, there's no possible way it could have got to the Caspian Sea. That is just my reading. Couldn't possibly have got there. I'd like to thank 55 Ella 2007K, who said she didn't think that a Boeing 777, which needs an 8,000 foot sealed runway, could possibly have landed on a dirt strip on an island. Well, Ella, some of these islands are pretty big. I make the largest of the Nicobar Islands about 50 miles by 20 miles, and there seem to be 4 of the Andaman Islands that are about that size as well. However, supporting your view, Ella, is a lovely comment here by Krishna Kumar M.S. 4 hours ago. I am sorry, sir, but landing in Andaman Island is kind of impossible because the biggest airport to land an aircraft like Malaysian Boeing 777 is controlled by Indian Navy, and all other small airports in the island are under armed force. I strongly believe it landed on sea only. Well, thanks very much, Krishna. I think I would have to agree with you. It would not be possible for the aircraft to have landed on a military-controlled island without the military being aware of it. And if the Indian Navy and the Indian Army didn't actually see it land, then I guess somewhere between here, when it disappeared, headed west, and then they seem to have pretty good indications that it did in fact turn northwest, it's regained its altitude and it's crossed the Andaman Islands, and that means that you now have to start looking in the middle of India for an 8,000 foot sealed runway that an aircraft could be refuelled at if in fact it went to the Caspian Sea. Here's the twice fuel range circle of possibilities, and there we have the Caspian Sea with Kazakhstan roughly about there, and then Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. Okay, but the only way to have got to Kazakhstan, and if it got there it could have also gone pretty much anywhere in Yemen, South Yemen, Oman, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, southern USSR. Well, it's not the USSR these days, but you get the picture. So, does the media mean to infer that the aircraft landed in India and took on a full load of fuel at its extreme range after recovering its height over the Bay of Bengal? Or do they mean to try and cover up the fact that using its extreme fuel reserves and landing with dry tanks, it could have got, where's our scale? It could have got 300 or 400 miles inside Pakistan. How many people in Pakistan have got arguments with how many Western governments? Scary, scary thought. As is the idea that on the full refuelled range, could have gone to a lot of places in Africa. There's not much to the west of Australia, not a whole lot to the northwest of Australia once you get south of Indonesia. But on the full refuelled range, yeah, it could have gone anywhere in Australia too. So at the moment, everybody's talking about the possibility that the pilot and the co-pilot have hijacked their own aeroplane, or that the crew have hijacked the aeroplane, the cabin crew, or that the passengers have hijacked the aeroplane. But so far there doesn't appear to be a whole lot of supporting evidence towards that. I do draw people's attention to the fact that in the very early days it was stressed that the aircraft had just completed successfully a major maintenance overhaul. So I suppose for the conspiracy theorists out there, it's time to begin wondering if somebody hacked the autopilot and connected it to a satellite transceiver so that the 239 people on board the Malaysian Boeing 777 could well have found themselves stuck sitting inside a drone, with the pilots, passengers just like everybody else in the rear cabin, because a radio signal from a satellite had taken over their aircraft. At the moment, it's only marginally less likely than the idea that an aeroplane aficionado, a captain with 18,000 flying hours who's cobbled together his own flight simulator at home, would switch off his transponder, switch off his radios, and then turn more than 90 degrees off course and fly out into the ocean, avoiding as much radar as you can avoid by going down to wavetop height after crossing the peninsula. Yeah, float that among your conspiracy boats. Did the drone circuitry go in at the last major overhaul, and did somebody else, somewhere else, with a really good satellite system, take over the aircraft? Who might have done that? Apparently there were a lot of Chinese, forgive the blowfly on the lens, there are a lot of Chinese high-tech engineers on the aircraft as well as artists, people who worked for companies like Huawei, who's been accused of hacking United States and allies of the United States computer systems all over the world. And who has the current world leadership in drone technology? I do believe it's the excited states of Norte Armed Americano. So yeah, as I said, this is one of the strangest and murkiest stories that I've ever heard of since I started studying levitation for the purpose of the defiance of gravity. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Keep on watching, because this space just gets more interesting. Ciao.